6%. And Facebook just unveiled a new app called Hello that allows mobile phone users to see who's calling and to block unwanted calls. I'm Tom Busby, CNBC Radio.
Companies spend hundreds of millions of dollars on sophisticated information security.
But that hasn't stopped us from exposing vital documents.
Who are we? Some rogue group of hackers, hell-bent on tearing down corporate establishment?
No, it's just everyone in the office who uses a printer.
From abandoned printouts to scanned documents emailed incorrectly, your printers can be your company's greatest security risk. Learn how to gain control of document security at nuance.com/gain control.
Have you had trouble with online dating? This is eHarmony founder Dr. Neil Clark Warren. We've created a new solution, EH Plus. EH Plus combines the personal attention of a matchmaker with eHarmony's extensive pool of great singles. EH Plus gives you hand-selected matches and freedom from being online. Get started today. Call 855-930-LOVE. That's 855-930-LOVE.
Good afternoon. It is 3:02. I'm Di Rice with the very latest in local news here on KCAA. Riverside County health officials are asking residents to take steps to prevent the West Nile virus from spreading. In 2014, 108 human cases of West Nile virus were reported in California, the second highest in state history. 12 cases were reported by Riverside County last year. Authorities say early warm temperatures and drought conditions can also bring higher than normal mosquito populations. You can take an active role to reduce the West Nile virus threat in their neighborhood by using insect repellent, being aware of dawn and dusk being peak hours for biting times for mosquitoes, and wearing pants and long-sleeve clothing outside. Also, the Stagecoach Country Music Festival takes place this weekend in Coachella. The sold-out weekend show includes contemporaries such as Blake Shelton, Miranda Lambert, the Eli Young Band, Sarah Evans, and the band Perry. Other performers include ABC's TV Nashville stars Charles Eston, Claire Bowen, and Chris Carmack. And of course, the show would not be complete without legendary acts such as the Oak Ridge Boys, Tim McGraw, Greg Allman, Mickey Gilley, and ZZ Top. Inland Empire weather. We are cloudy through the next couple of days. Chance of showers increasing through tomorrow. Highs tomorrow near about 69. Overnight dropping down to about 55. We're currently at 69 degrees here in San Bernardino. Looking at your drive in the Cajon Pass, there is an accident blocking the left lane on the northbound side just before Kenwood. And that is the left lane. Take your time there. Also, the off-ramp is blocked on the 210 eastbound right at Highland here in San Bernardino. That is the very latest with news, weather, and traffic on the station that leaves no listener behind, KCAA 1050 AM.
CNBC Headline News is brought to you exclusively by West Coast Auto, located at 5180 Holt Boulevard in Montclair, where you'll find the widest selection of the most pristine used automobiles in Southern California.
West Coast Auto of Montclair is the 2015 top-rated pre-owned dealer in California, offering a service department that surpasses expectations in every single way. And while you're there, browse West Coast Auto's extensive lot of best-in-class pre-owned vehicles.
You're getting the best-in-class vehicles with financing options like 0% down and no payments for 90 days. Visit westcoastauto.com or call 9099-million.
West Coast Auto Montclair.
Do you have a broken window or rock chip on your vehicle that needs repair? Give us a call at HM Auto Glass, 951-858-5190. HM Auto Glass is your locally owned and operated auto glass specialist, offering low cost and high quality auto glass repair and replacement. We also work with all major insurance companies and offer free mobile service. So call us, 951-858-5190. That number again is 951-858-5190.
This is KCAA.
Greetings and welcome to What's It All About? This is Dr. Donald Jolly Gabriel on KCAA 1050 on your AM radio dial. And we are here today with our show. what's it all about, and God only knows what's it all about. But today I know. Today we're going to be talking about something that we talk about really quite often because it's a very, very important subject. And I am besieged with this subject and problem because of the many patients at our medical center that we're treating with hyperbaric oxygen therapy for various things involved in taking drugs, and not street drugs, but pharmaceutical drugs, prescription drugs. And many of these drugs are totally unnecessary and sometimes, in my humble opinion, are prescribed needlessly. And today we have with us as a guest Dr. Toby Watson, who is quite familiar with this particular challenge that we're going through right now. And it's really kind of, as well as other things involved, but it's kind of a battle, I think, between big pharma and production of multi-billions. I think the pharmaceutical industry took in over $325 billion. I don't know if that's 1 year, a couple years, but it's in the recent times, very, very recent times. And that's a lot of money no matter what. Even if it's several years, it's a lot of money. So I want to introduce Dr. Toby Watson. And Dr. Watson, would you say hello to our guests?
Hi, thank you so much for having me today.
Well, I am delighted to have you here, and I know that you are going to enlighten us, and not only enlighten us, I want to motivate all of us to be interested in recognizing that what we're talking about today is a problem, and it could turn out to be a super major problem. I see children. We're treating a lot of children with various problems, all the way from brain tumors, autism, brain damage, sustained TBIs by falling off of a bicycle or falling out a window or falling off skateboards or whatever kids do to fall off something and injure their head. And many of them are on psych drugs, and some of them have what I have coined as a new medical problem, and I call it zombosis. Zombosis, that's walking around like a zombie. Some of these little kids and soldiers, we interact with a lot of soldiers who have percussive injury, and they are wandering around on all these psych drugs and really putting themselves, by taking these psych drugs, into a state where they're not real, they're not existing in the real world, and they seem to me to be contributing to certain dilemmas and psychosis and problems of being wigged out and all of these things that allow you not to function normally in a normal world, or at least a half normal world. So, Dr. Toby Watson, can you please give us a little bit of background and talk to us about some of the particulars that we need to know about?
Sure. And you're exactly right to have those concerns. I think they're well founded. I think a lot of people and a lot of Americans recognize those concerns. The science now is starting to prove that our concerns and our intuition was exactly right. The Center for Disease Control, recently reported this past year about toddlers being prescribed psychotropic drugs. CCHR, .org highlighted that it was actually not just 10,000 toddlers, being prescribed drugs, but actually over 250,000 infants, 0 to 1 years old, being given psychiatric medications. Other than, maybe babies being born already intoxicated by these and having to be tapered down, there really is no justification for doing things like that. What we're seeing, though, now is kids that have been repeatedly medicated with psychotropic medications for years are starting to match what the research has shown. The clinical trial data indicating that if you take a psychotropic drug and let's say you're depressed, you will increase the likelihood of committing suicide and also having suicidal ideation and having aggression and being, homicidal even. So the idea that we're seeing more and more tragedies, over the country, whether it be a school shooting or a mass shooting or a pilot crashing a plane or anything like this, we're starting to notice a trend where all of these incidents are being linked to the individual taking a mind-altering drug that controls, if you should shoot, or if you're aggressive, or if you're suicidal, or if you want to crash a plane. I mean, we can get in discussions about gun violence and all these other things about whether people should or shouldn't have guns and that. But we really should be having a discussion also about the fact that if someone is taking a drug that we know affects how you perceive the world and how you perceive yourself, and we have the data that indicates that you will become more suicidal and more aggressive by taking this drug, then we really need to consider whether or not these drugs should be on the market. There was a study just recently done by Glenn Mullen and Ferberg and Moore. And all they did is they said, let's just look at the FDA database. We got, thousands of medications on the market right now, about over 4,000 medications currently out there. And they said, let's just see what medications are getting reported as having the adverse reporting. And saying that, we gave this medicine to somebody, and boy, they really had a bad reaction to it. And specifically looking at violence. And that's what they wanted to find out. Are there other drugs out there that cause violence, or at least that we can show that they're really being reported back to the FDA, which we recognize we only get about 1%, if that even, reported back to the FDA when there's actually an incident of something. So of the review they did, what they found in a very short period of time is that it triggered at least 200 case reports of serious violence during the 69-month period. So they said, wow, okay, we found these rates of violence over a 69-month period of time. And they said, well, what kind of drugs were they? Well, of the 31 drugs, and this is the part, of the 31 drugs, they found that the vast majority, 67% of the time, over two-thirds of the time, they all came from psychiatric drugs. So the 400 cases of homicide that they found over the period of time, the 400 physical assaults, 223 types of other violence, they had 900 reports of just being homicidal, where they didn't commit a homicide, but they were homicidal in their thinking. All were related to actual psychiatric drugs. And so this kind of started to really make some waves in the literature, in the psychiatric literature, highlighting that these drugs are extremely dangerous, and maybe we shouldn't be giving them to pilots or people who are in charge of guns.
Well, all of this is so true, but it's totally overwhelming. It's overwhelming. What do we do? What can we do about this? What can we do to try to influence our legislators? I suppose we could begin writing campaigns to them, send them links or copies of research, try to get them involved in seeing the reality of the equation, because they're certainly not seeing it enough, at least, to make some dramatic changes.
Correct. And I think that's what people need to do now is once they start to see these things happening, they can do things. Well, first of all, they need to take care of themselves. So first, they're going to want to make sure that they're trying to make healthy choices in their own life, staying away from things that they know are toxic to themselves, whether it be actually psychotropic drugs or just other things that happen in their life, making sure they get exercise and good nutrition, and that they're, trying to live the best life that they can, spiritual life as well as, medical and interpersonal. But then when it goes beyond that, they need to be an informed consumer for their family. So when they have a friend or a family member or, heaven forbid, a child who does start to struggle a little bit, with something, that they really take a very assertive role in that, and that they don't just succumb to an authority figure, because that's usually what happens is you have a concern, my child's a little anxious to going to school, or there's some sort of issue going on, being bullied, and you go and you tell your medical doctor, your general practitioner. And we know from the research that 9 out of 10 times, if you mention anything about an emotional issue or a mental health issue to your medical doctor, you're going to get a prescription. You're going to get a drug. So you need to be able to assert and say, no, I'm not interested in that. What else can I do? They can also then join organizations, that really need their support. There's a vast array of organizations out there that are doing excellent work. One I mentioned, a website where they can go is www.cchrint.org, and that is the Citizens Commission for Human Rights International Group. It's a nonprofit group. It's kind of I don't want to say a watchdog group, but really it's supporting human rights, saying that people need to be informed about their choices, and in particular, psychiatric choices, that these things and the medicine drugs that they give can in fact cause extreme harm to people. And they really are a wonderful group for supporting new legislation. They've enacted more laws and legislation than any other organization in the world that I'm aware of. And so that's one thing they could do. If they're struggling themselves, they can go to a group like mindfreedom.org. That's a great support group that also will be very supportive of a non-pharmaceutical approach. There's madinamerica.org, which is really a wonderful blogging source of experts. I mean, you'll find just dozens and dozens of researchers and experts. These are the people who actually do the studies and write about the studies that are being done. And you can blog with them and ask questions and find out information. madinamerica.org is another wonderful organization. If you need legal help, whether you go to CCHR or there's Psych Rights, which is just PSYCHRIGHT.org, Psych Rights. Again, a nonprofit group that really is trying to educate, attorneys and practitioners as well as, the public, that there is a lot of legislation, a lot of law out there that can be very supportive to people. So there's a lot of things like that people can do.
Well, Dr. Watson, CCHR is such an incredible organization. It's a worldwide organization, funded very, very well, very, very well, and they are doing a great job, and they need our help. They're doing a great job. They have helped people that I have sent over there from our medical center who have there have been people whose children have been ordered by the court to take psych drugs, and the parents didn't want them to. And I have one particular case in mind where they sent the police to arrest the parents and take the child away because the parents wouldn't allow their child to have these psych drugs. The court ordered it, and they were going to remove the child from the parental control. And they sent out with guns. They had guns to arrest them and take the kid away. And CCHR battled them and won that particular battle, and has won many other battles. And I think that they have been responsible for passing 160 some laws in that area regarding this particular problem. And I think people need to be more aware of CCHR, the Citizens Commission on Human Rights. It is absolutely a wonderful organization. And you have that website, don't you, Doctor?
I do.
Can you give it out? Can you give it out again so that everybody can and have it? And I just urge you all to go to the website, and anybody you know who needs more education about psych drugs and the incredible evils that they're perpetrating on our society can go and learn about. So Dr. Watson will give you the website. There's two groups. One is the international group, and the other one is the local United States group. So if you would do that, Doctor, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. The local United States group is the www.cchr.org, and the international group is you just add INT to the end, so it's cchrint.org. And you're right, they do need their support, both physically as well as financially. And I encourage any of your professional listeners that are out there, meaning anyone who's in the mental health field, whether they're a social worker, even a teacher that might be out there, anybody that has contacts like that, they really should become much more educated and interested in this subject, because right now we have roughly 1 out of 5 individuals in the United States taking a psychotropic drug. And for children in some communities, it's obscene, but it's much higher. It's 1 out of every 2 or 1 out of every 4, depending on what community you're in. The rates that people are being diagnosed are staggering. And the American Psychiatric Association indicates that half of all your listeners, maybe not your listeners, but half of the United States are going to be mentally ill at some point in their life.
Oh, I think I must be mentally ill, because I've been I have battled a bit of high blood pressure for a while, and it's mostly gone now, thank God. But I went through pretty much of a problem, and I got 5 prescriptions for psych drugs, 5 of them. Oof. I haven't taken one of them. 5 different prescriptions for for psych drugs because I needed them to help lower my blood pressure, along with all the medications they were giving me, which I ended up not taking all of them. I figured out a way to deal with my own problem very well, actually, much better than all the drugs they wanted me to take. But I was shocked by the fact that they're giving me psych drugs for my high blood pressure. I don't know if that's anyway. I'm still in shock.
Well, it would definitely be off-label, and and that quantity would be pretty disturbing and shocking. But unfortunately, we see a lot of shocking statistics. We see that veterans that are coming back with post-war trauma, meaning that they've been in battle, they've suffered an extreme experience. What they're going through is perfectly normal, meaning that, hey, when you come back from an extreme experience, you're going to have flashbacks. You're going to have mood dysregulation. You're going to have a lot of things that, make you not sleep well at night. And we call it PTSD. But what unfortunately they're getting is psychiatric medications, like antipsychotic drugs. So what we're seeing is over 300,000 veterans now on antipsychotic medications for PTSD. And there's no data, no research to support taking an antipsychotic medication is going to help with PTSD. It's off-label.
Well,
but a doctor can write for anything.
It's crazy. It's not only off-label, but there's some crazy stuff going on there. A group of us a number of years ago in the hyperbaric medical industry had started a program to really find out if this post-traumatic stress disorder or syndrome was actually the problem. And we are now convinced that the majority of the soldiers who have come back, especially from Afghanistan and Iraq and that problem area, have TBI. They actually have traumatic brain injury, tissue injury to the brain that is a result of a percussive incident. And it doesn't mean that you have to be in an explosion and explode, or it doesn't even mean that you have to hit your head as a result, but there's an incredible energy wave that emanates from an explosion. And if you're standing or sitting hundreds of feet away, you can receive that wave and be knocked over and jarred and not even hit your head and have a brain injury. And people will look at me and say, well, how is that possible? Well, because the brain sits within the skull. And if your body moves too quickly, your brain hits the skull. The inside of the skull is not smooth like the outside of the skull. It's kind of jagged. And if there is movement, not only do you hit the top of the skull or the side of the skull, but if your brain moves within the skull, it can be very heavily injured. The tissue can be injured, and you have a brain damage. And there are other ways of fixing brain damage. The psych drugs do nothing to do tissue repair, nothing at all. They have absolutely no effect. What has an effect, and we know one thing that has an effect, is hyperbaric oxygen therapy. It can affect wounds on the body, sores, diabetic problems, plastic surgery that's not healing, wounds, internal wounds resulting from athletic injuries and those kinds of things. It heals them very quickly. That's a knowable, recognizable, acceptable medical fact. But since most TBI, traumatic brain injury, is tissue injury to the brain itself, it falls in the same category, and hyperbaric medicine will help heal the brain tissue. We've already proven that. We already know it. We have recognition from congressmen. We already states that have recognized that and are paying for soldiers to be treated with hyperbaric oxygen. So that we know, and psych drugs are not going to affect that at all. That's utterly, completely ridiculous.
Well, you're exactly right about the psychiatric medications. Psychiatric medications don't correct imbalances. Even though the little bouncing Zoloft ball may say that it may correct an imbalance, it's not true. We know that. There's been research done. It was a theory. It was a theory that they had, and it was disproven throughout the 80s. I mean, we've seen the studies that have come through. There are no differences of homeolytic acid levels for people who have psychosis. There's no serotonin, differences. We don't have any way to measure that actually in the brain. We're not even sure where we would measure it, what part of the brain. And the way that they try to measure it through a secondary process is very rudimentary. And even if they could get some measurements, we still don't know that would actually be the cause. It could be the result, or the aftermath. So if someone was depressed and you see, hey, there's a difference in their brain, well, great, they're depressed. I would expect to see a difference in the brain. But no psych drug actually corrects any sort of imbalance or anything like that. And I'm not surprised to hear you talk about the hyperbariatic, if I'm saying it correctly, treatment, and it's been effective. We know from research, all the way dating back to like 1965 when these studies were first being done by Slater, when they looked at patients saying, if we see psychiatric patients and we go into their communities, meaning that we take a study and we go into a psych ward or we go into a psychiatric hospital and we do a bunch of tests on people, the full medical test, everything, what we find that these psych patients really had medical conditions, and they weren't psychiatric patients. They actually had true medical conditions, and their symptoms were mimicking psychiatric conditions. Or, at a minimum, at least, it was making the psychiatric condition worse. So Slater, back in 1965, did this. They found that 33% of people who we thought were psychiatric patients really actually had medical conditions going on that were mimicking it. And, these studies have been replicated. Johnson in 1968 did it. Hall in 78 did it. Sox in 1989 did it. Again, Barsh, Coran, it goes on Lambert. So if you average all these studies going all the way back from then to now, you can find on an average, rough average, about 15 to 20% of all psychiatric patients that are being treated in facilities right now have true medical conditions, something else that they either missed or that they're exacerbating the problem and they're not being treated properly. So if you think of that alone, think of the millions of people right now that are being given psychiatric meds who have been told that they have a label, they've been told it's genetic, they've been told it's a chemical imbalance, they've been told it's got to be lifelong, and one of every 5 of them has an actual medical condition that isn't psychiatric at all. And they're not being told the truth about what really is going on and what really could be effective.
Absolutely,
as far as the long term.
Absolutely, and they're also inducing a lot of depressive problems and characteristics and creating a lot of psychological issues that shouldn't be there. Doctor, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back to further educate. And I look at this as an educational effort for our listeners. This is Dr. Donald Jolly Gabriel on KCAA 1050 on your AM radio dial. We're going to take a break. We'll be back in about 3 minutes.
Hi, welcome to AT&T.
Hi, can you tell us more about rollover data?
Yeah, what do we have to do?
Not a thing. If you're a Mobile Share Value customer, your unused plan data automatically rolls over for 1 month. It's our way of saying thanks.
That's so wonderful.
Let's hug.
Oh, that's okay. We don't have to.
I think we do.
Yeah, I think we do.
Nice.
Let's bring it in. Oh, wow. And we're hugging. All 3 of us. Really hugging. Ooh, who smells like bacon?
Introducing AT&T Rollover Data. All Mobile Share Value plans now come with rollover data on the network with the nation's strongest LTE signal. AT&T, mobilizing your world. AT&T reminds you to never text and drive. It can wait.
Available only with AT&T Mobile Share Value plans. Rollover data automatically expires after 1 month or with any plan change. Other restrictions apply. Visit att.com/rollover data for details. Signal strength claim based only on average LTE signal strength for national carriers.
When our water heater broke down last month, it was a nightmare. It took 5 hours for the plumber to show up, and he charged us a couple of $100 just to come out. And then it cost another $1,800 to put in the new water heater. By the time it was all said and done, I felt like I'd been taken. But what else could I do?
The smartest thing you can do is get a home warranty from American Residential Warranty. Their home warranties pay to repair or replace all your major appliances when they break, and they will break, and at the worst possible time. Call American Residential Warranty right now for free information on home warranties starting at just pennies a day. Don't wait for your refrigerator to stop running or your ceiling fans to stop turning. Call American Residential Warranty right now. Ask how you can save up to 50% on washer and dryer coverage. Just call 1-800-643-9406. That's 1-800-643-9406. Again, 1-800-643-9406. Call now.
Attention teachers, nurses, social workers, government employees, police officers, and firefighters. If you are still paying on student loans, then get ready for a special announcement. Your entire student loan can be forgiven. You heard correctly. Broadsword Student Advantage has free information on how you can potentially have the remaining balance of your student loan debt completely forgiven. We can help anyone with student loans potentially cut their payments in half, reduce their interest rate, or consolidate their outstanding loan. But if you are a teacher, nurse, social worker, government employee, police officer, or firefighter, you have the added benefit of potentially having your student loan completely forgiven. Call now for free information to find out how. Call 800-481-2993. That's 800-481-2993. Don't waste another payment on your old student loans. Call for your free information now. 800-481-2993. That's 800-481-2993.
Go ahead and say it. We're all ears. AM 1050 KCAA.
Greetings and welcome back to What's It All About. This is Dr. Donald Jolly Gabriel on KCAA 1050 on your AM radio dial. And we have Dr. Toby Watson as our guest. We're talking about psych drugs and the inappropriateness of most of them and what's happening to our society and our children as a result of them. And so, Dr. Watson, I'd like to ask you a question regarding children who are, well, not children, infants who are diagnosed with a condition that would require some kind of psych drug. How is that possible?
There is no, well, let's start with this. Before I can diagnose somebody, we use the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. It's a book, kind of like the physician desk reference, but it's different. The difference is that in the physician desk reference, those are true medical conditions. Those are things that we find through pathophysiological tissue or at autopsy, and they're discovered. So all those diagnoses and all those diseases were discovered. But in the DSM, in our book, or in the psychiatric book, these weren't discovered. They were created. And it's created through a panel discussion. So a bunch of people get together, a bunch of people who have drug company funding and ties, like the DSM-4, where 100% of them had drug funding ties to the drugs that they're going to peddle or push. What they do is they have a meeting and they say, hey, I think we should call all these behaviors or this cluster of behaviors or thoughts or feelings, we're going to call it generalized anxiety, or we're going to call it ADHD, or we're going to call it whatever, some new disease that they want to make up, or metaphorical disease. And that's how you create it. So it's a checkoff list. That's all it is, a checkoff list. So when I have to diagnose somebody, which I don't have to, but if somebody wants a diagnosis for some reason, I basically go through a series of checkoff questions. Do you fidget? Do you do this? Do you do that? Do you spend too much? Do you not spend enough? Do you go outside too much? And so you keep asking questions, and based on those questions, you label somebody. But remember, they can't have it. So they don't have, like, ADHD. It's improper English because you can't have a metaphorical thing. It's not it'd be like saying I have Catholic or I have socialism. I can't have socialism. I can be labeled socialist. I can be labeled Catholic if I do things or don't do things, or believe in things or don't believe in things. But I can't really have it. It's not something inside of me. So when an infant is given a label by some doctor and says, well, your infant, I think, has got bipolar, that really means that he believes that based on a checkoff list, your baby is exhibiting behaviors. There is absolutely no justification. And in my book, it would be absolutely unethical for any doctor to ever diagnose a child like that, especially under like 1, 2, 3 years old. It'd be impossible to say that these behaviors are, exhibited enough of a time in multiple domains, in social life, in education or academics or to preschool and at home, that they could meet the criteria. But yet we know that infants, and I'm going to run through this real quickly, 250,000 infants, 0 to 1 years old, are given anti-anxiety drugs like Xanax, or some of the most abused drugs in the country right now. That is an epidemic. We have over 26,000 of them being given antidepressants like Prozac and Zoloft, the very drugs that are being linked to people becoming suicidal and aggressive. We have another, huge group of young kids being given over 1,000, given ADHD drugs, like stimulant drugs, basically like cocaine. the Ritalin and Adderall and Concerta.
What starts this process? What starts the process? How does a child, an infant, get prescribed these kind of drugs? What brings it about?
Well, from my research and finding out, because I was curious about this too, the only things I found out were two. The mother came in intoxicated on these drugs herself, and thus the infant then was intoxicated. So if the mother's already taking Xanax or is already drug addicted to Xanax, and the baby comes out, if the baby comes out and doesn't get more Xanax, it'll go through withdrawal reactions, which could be very dangerous. Again, starting a psychotropic and stopping a psychotropic drug is extremely dangerous. None of your listeners, if they're taking one, should ever abruptly stop their medication. They really should be talking to a medical provider or somebody to make sure it's done safely, because it's very dangerous to stop these drugs, and it's very dangerous to start them. So one way that the infants get on it is the doctor says, oh, we have somebody who's already taken it. The infant's already addicted to this. They're already taking it. So we have to keep them on it. And so they put them on it right off the bat because they're worried about withdrawal reactions. The alternative, and what I've seen more and more happening, is that practitioners now are saying prophylactically, meaning just in case the infant ends up being like mom or like dad, we're going to give them this quote-unquote medicine before they actually have any symptoms. So here you have a mother who comes in, she's been labeled bipolar, she, maybe has big mood ups and downs and, exhibits some very emotional dysregulation or really struggling. The doctor says, oh, she's bipolar, she's on these medicines. So what they say is like, well, it runs in families, therefore it must be genetic. So therefore the baby is going to be bipolar maybe. So let's try to treat the baby before the bipolar comes about. And so they give the drugs before anything even shows up, in the hopes that maybe the baby won't develop into a child who exhibits the same behavior. Keep in mind, there is no clinical research, no study to say that that is safe and effective to do that, or it will actually be helpful in preventing something. In fact, the research says the exact opposite. We have a long history going decades, all the way back to the 60s, showing if you take a psychotropic medication, let's say like an antipsychotic, what it does is it will start to have an effect on your brain, which all drugs do, but it'll cause a super sensitivity to your brain. Because it changes the chemicals in your brain, it may lower or increase certain neurotransmitters. And your brain tries to compensate. It tries to do the exact opposite of the toxic effect of the drug. So whereas you start to maybe lower dopamine, all of a sudden your brain says, hey, this drug's making me not have dopamine. So it regulates it up. It upregulates it and creates more of it. So what you do is you have a child, an infant, who's being given a drug that changes their neurochemistry, makes them more susceptible, and have a super sensitivity to the very problem they're trying to prevent. And therefore, sure enough, like we've seen in the research now, we're seeing people become gravely disabled mentally. Bob Whitaker, Pulitzer Prize nominee writer, health writer for the Boston Globe, just a brilliant, man, not a medical background, but again, a writer, a researcher, wrote Anatomy of an Epidemic. If you haven't read the book, you've got to pick it up, Anatomy of an Epidemic. He highlights that the more medicine we give these people, the more drugs, psychiatric drugs we're giving them, the higher the dose, the more drugs, the higher the rate of mental disability. And he shows that our disability in this country is skyrocketing, and it's correlational and it's causal because of the psychiatric medications.
And it's also financially depleting our entire program for disability payments.
Exactly. We're bankrupting our country by literally mentally disabling people. And not even just we're actually physically disabling their brain. Grace Jackson has a wonderful book, Drug-Induced Dementia, The Perfect Crime. And that book highlights the actual research that actually, if you want to learn the ins and outs, if you got any of the medical providers out there that are listening, they want to really learn the actual reasons why the brain is actually being damaged. She highlights it through all the different studies and animal studies as well.
Okay, that brings me to a point where I am compelled to ask this question. What is the fundamental reason for all of this taking place? Bottom line, what is it?
I'd love to have one simple answer, and probably the most simple, straightforward answer is money. The biggest answer is that we have, like you said, billions and billions of dollars at stake here. And I think it's a disbursement of responsibility. When you have a huge, massive corporation that is trying to be profitable, there are so many divisions and so many different people involved in trying to promote their drug that they each, maybe push the guidelines a little bit. I mean, some maybe just get rid of the guidelines and say, hey, I don't care, I'm going to lie. They're going to ghostwrite a story. They're going to manipulate data. GlaxoSmithKline, makers of Paxil. Hey, let's have this person committed suicide. Well, we won't call it a suicide. We'll call it a non-drug responder. And that's like, really? They're hiding that kind of data from the doctors like myself and all the researchers and the FDA. So remember, to get a drug approved through the FDA doesn't test any drugs. They've never tested any drug in the history of the FDA. What happens is that a drug company formulates a new drug. They go and let's say they have 50 different clinical trials running, and they have 48 failures. 48 times it just crash, burn, it's horrible, it doesn't work, it's just not a good drug. But they get two that show that they're working, and like, wow, it's as good as a placebo, and it didn't seem like it caused major harm. Of course, they manipulate the data and cause suicide, maybe a non-drug responder, and they do other things like get rid of all the suicidal patients right off the bat so they don't mess up the study, and the double blind is broken so the doctor really knows which patient's getting the drug, so they give them a little extra encouragement. So all these things are weighted towards the drug company, and finally they get two studies that say that, yes, it's okay. That's the data they give to the FDA. All the rest gets hidden, doesn't get published, nobody learns about it. That doesn't get published, and those journals aren't willing to publish, negative results. There's a great study that looked at that. What gets published is positive results. And if you submit your negative result, they don't publish it. So doctors like myself, if we do a little Google search and say, are antidepressants effective for depression? I'm going to see a lot of studies that say absolutely, and maybe a couple that say no. Now, you'd think that just means there's more studies that show that it's effective. Not the case. What you're seeing is that you have journal biases. You have more journals publishing the positive results, minimizing the negative. You also have the problem of the studies that you're seeing are all funded, or a lot of them are funded, the vast majority of them are funded, 90+%, by pharmaceutical money in some way. And every time somebody said, no, I don't like, or the medication didn't work, that researcher isn't called back maybe again. Maybe they don't get funding again. So there's such a stacked weight against anything that shows that their product is not effective, that doctors like myself, the FDA, the public in general, they don't have access. So it really does come down to a lot of biases, a lot of funding, and a lot of money. And in some cases, just a lot of control, where you have a lot of psychiatrists and a lot of doctors who don't like to be questioned, and they know best, and they want to feel better, like that they're helping somebody because they went in the field to be helping. And it's very hard to tell a psychiatrist that the treatment, quote unquote, that they're giving is actually killing their patient. And you have a lot of cognitive dissonance, meaning that they cannot believe that what they've been doing is actually harming people. They need to believe that they are good people and that they have not been fooled and that they know what they're doing. And so I think that there's a lot of people who are just really struggling right now to see the big picture of what's actually happening.
Well, the bottom line is, it is money. You are absolutely right. Bottom line is, it was money, and you're absolutely right. So I think with that, we will begin the process of ending our show. And Doctor, I want to talk to you again. I think that we should develop some scenario where we can help educate people what to do about it. We're planting seeds now of knowledge, but what to do with that knowledge. So if you would be so kind to talk to Vicki about rescheduling with me, I would appreciate it very much. Maybe 4 or 5 weeks from now, we can get together and take step number 2, graduate up to a level of what can we do to more effectively educate people to do something about what's going on. And I truly appreciate you being with us today, and I look forward to talking to you again. You have great vitality, great knowledge, you present very well, and I appreciate your giving us your time and energy today very much.
Sure, absolutely. I appreciate it. Thank you again.
Well, take care. God bless you. Be healthy, and we'll talk to you very, very soon.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I understand that our resident theologian and philosopher is on the line, and that is Dr. J. Dr. J, are you there?
Yes. Can everybody hear me?
Well, I hope they can hear you. You can't hear them, but...
no, but hopefully you can hear me.
Hopefully I can hear you, and hopefully they can hear you too.
All right.
We have our short segment now, and I'm wondering if you have any input from emails and texts and anything.
Well, two things. Number one, regarding the subject that you've been talking about, is repeated people who have some kind of brain damage, which can be brought about by a number of things. But the fact that the hyperbaric oxygen therapy actually works for these people, whereas the medications oftentimes don't, and the fact that the hyperbaric oxygen therapy actually rebuilds and re-knits the blood vessels, which I think is just absolutely fantastic. And that was the first thing that came up. And then the second thing had to do with housing for retired people.
Okay, there's one thing that I can bring up about what you said. There's a movie that we cooperated in funding, and we had a film school students do it. But it involves interviewing some congressmen and people who are well-placed, who are very much in favor of what we've done in hyperbarics with healing of brain injury, even going so far as to influence several states to mandate that soldiers in their state be treated with hyperbaric oxygen therapy, and the state will pay for it, even if the Veterans Affairs Division at this point in time won't. And that's a great victory, because it is true. We can validate the treatment and healing of these brain problems with very sophisticated nuclear brain scans that can be done of the brain before and after, and that's very, very exciting. So your bringing up that subject gave me an opportunity to say that, because we're talking about medical facts now. We're not talking about opinions. We're talking about absolute medical facts. And that's a good thing. And hopefully, if anybody would like to have this movie, I do have copies of it. I could send them for free. The only thing I would ask them to do is call this phone number and leave their name and address and a request for the movie called Brainstorm. Brainstorm. Anyone who has anybody in the service who especially has PSTD or is diagnosed with that, even though it may be TBI, should call and request a free copy of this movie, and I will send it to you. It's a documentary, actually, and you can call area code 949-680-1915. That's area code 949-680-1915, and we'll send you a free copy of this movie. It was done by the students at the Film Institute in Los Angeles. And it looks like it. It's not a wild Hollywood production that $50 million was spent on. It's a low-budget documentary that was made for a purpose. It's the information and the people involved who are supporting doing this that really is important. So, and the other thing, Dr. J, that I'd like to bring up is that I visit regularly the area of Naples and Venice near Santa Monica Beach in Southern California, just for the purpose of interacting with a lot of homeless vets that are down there. And there are many homeless ones wandering around, and most of them are on psych drugs. In fact, I would venture to say almost all of them are on psych drugs. And the ones that aren't are probably the ones that just aren't taking them. But they're prescribed psych drugs, and I visit with them.
The interesting thing about what you just said is that with many of the violent crimes that are going on, particularly with young people and the use of guns and knives and people really doing great harm, that the thing that the public is not hearing about all is that virtually all of them are on drugs.
Yeah,
And
psych drugs, that's true. The perpetrators of the school shootings and some of the other, even that psychiatrist that had that horrible rampage and killed some people on an Air Force base. He was also a patient on psych drugs, and the students, the perpetrators of the crimes of the high school area shootings have been on psych drugs, which is very, very sad. So that being said, we know that now. So what are we going to do about it? That's the next question. Now you mentioned something else about what?
Yes, I mentioned about people who are 65 and older. What's happening is they're trying. They've got financial problems, and having a place to live is becoming a problem. And they try to get on these lists and things like that, and have access to housing that they can live with. And the fact is that it's not working for them because the lists are full and there's nobody there.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. That's very true. When these programs were implemented, it was reasonable. It seemed to have worked for a long, long time. But as the economic condition has regressed a bit, the rent's gone up dramatically. It is a big problem, and there are solutions to that problem. One of them has been implemented by churches and church corporations over the years, and that is to establish non-profit corporations to get involved in building places and then have them subsidized by Section 8, which has worked dramatically well. However, it isn't working so well now because the government's in a financial mess, and I don't know how it's going to get out of it. But I believe that nonprofits, I believe churches should take the lead, should begin to raise some money to build places that are dignified, not lavish, but dignified, where rent could be charged that would cover the basic costs of operating, and enough money could be raised to help supplement the construction costs so that the loans on the property wouldn't have to be too much. I think that's one answer. I really, really do. And I think if I could get enough people interested in cooperating on a pilot project, and they can contact me at KCAA Radio in San Bernardino, I would be happy to see what we could do to get some people interested to start something like that. And I think with a combination of fundraising efforts, we could do it. And I'm very excited about that, and I would love to do it, but I can't do it alone. Can't do it alone. Let's get some people together and embark on a project. So if you have any ideas,
I think that's a great idea. I would love to support that as well.
Well, why don't you? Let's support it and see what we can do to gather up some interest. I'm open, wide open. I need somebody to help. I'll go out and do public speaking. I'll travel around and go to churches and go to groups, and I'll get a university to have a department volunteer class to us as a project to help us with the paperwork and the presentations and all of that. I can do that, but I need help. I can't do it all alone. So anybody who's really interested, rather than just having hot air, let's come up with something and do it. I'm ready. I'm ready for action.
Well, let's hope that people listening to this, because a simple phone call from people and give you the opportunity to get in touch with them. Who knows? I mean, they could open a doorway and they don't realize how helpful they can be with just a simple phone call.
Well, nobody realizes. Look, you hold a mustard seed or an oak tree seed in your hand, and it's a tiny little thing, or an apple seed, and you don't really think about the fact if you plant an apple seed, you're going to be responsible for trillions of apples till the end of time, and there's no way to stop it. You plant a seed, a tree grows, and it produces apples, and they produce many hundreds and thousands of seeds, and they produce thousands of seeds, and birds are carrying around and dropping them around, and they're growing, and pretty soon there's trillions of apples all over the world because you started dropping seeds. And, an idea is certainly a seed, but unless it's fertilized and brought to action, nothing will happen to it. And that's why most people's lives don't work very well, because they don't bring things to reality. They daydream, and that's about it, and that gets us nowhere.
Amen.
Amen.
It's unfortunate.
Amen. Amen. Hallelujah, baby. How much more time do we have, Mr. Engineer? I know we're getting down to it. We have about 5 minutes left. So, anything else, Dr. J, that we've had bring to our attention from?
Well, the only thing I could add to that is that people do complain to me because I'm easy to talk to and so on. And on top of the housing, the other problem seems to be the way the medical thing is going and the way they're being treated and the programs that they're on and such like that. And one of the main complaints is, I'll try to make this as brief as I can.
Yeah, real brief.
Is they're complaining about they're just managing the money and they're not really giving them the help and the care that they would.
All right.
Like
Well, hey, okay, I acknowledge that. I think that's absolutely true. And also, I think that people need to help manage their own medical care, and they need to do some research. And right now, the whole world comes to them. I remember when I was in university and I was in high school and going to school even after those periods of time to learn extra things. I had to do a heck of a lot of work. I trekked to the library. I spent hours trying to find stuff. Now, you know what I do? I sit in a big chair at my desk and I punch buttons, and the whole world comes to me. And everybody with an illness, with a condition, needs to study their condition, look at research on their condition, look at possibilities, look at alternative and complementary treatments. They need to work, and they need to work hard. They need to work their ass off, learning what's wrong with them, and they need to push the doctors. That's what my advice is. Get off our butts, learn all we can, question, demand answers, always be respectful and lovely and wonderful and in a learning mode, but also in a motivational mode to get something done. I see patients all the time who suffer and some die because nothing gets done or the wrong thing gets done or not enough gets done because the patient knows nothing about what's going on. And that is extremely sad, isn't it?
It is indeed.
All right.
It is indeed.
So our challenge
I hope
is...
the people out there are hearing that because you just said it all, and that applies to everything, actually.
Well, yeah,
Not
it does.
just-
But you know what?
Yeah.
We're complacent. We're lazy. We want everything done for us. And we believe that because somebody is an accountant or they know everything, or the doctor, they know everything, they're this or that, or they know everything. They don't. They don't. Why do you suppose you call medical practice? What's the reason for it? The reason for it is because most of the time we don't know what the hell we're doing unless we're expert in the absolute area that we're dealing with. And then, thank God, we begin to develop expertise. I know doctors like this. I work with them. I love them. I honor them. I send patients to them, and they get answers and they get results. But oftentimes you can't blame these doctors. Their new doctors come out and they don't know what's going on. They have to learn. And if they don't learn from somebody who really knows and who really wants to teach them in their first years of internship and fellowship and all the things they have to do, they're going to stumble. So we have a really big challenge. So I think we only have about 2 minutes
we're
left.
about done.
Yeah, we're about done. So my last words of advice are, remember, you are a human person. You are a spiritual person humanizing. Enjoy the humanization process. Take responsibility for the actual physical human part of you called a body. Take the best care of it. Feed it the best fuel. Do things that will keep it alive longer and keep it functioning, and in turn, it will feed your psychological and mental and intellectual life, and you will be a full human person. Don't forget your spirituality. It is important. What your faith factor is will determine what your hope is. The higher your level of hope, the better your life will be. If you have no hope, you are hopeless. Nobody wants to be hopeless. Take responsibility for developing a faith factor, letting it grow into a hope factor. Use your hope to live life to the fullest. God bless each and every one of you. Do the best you can. We hope to see you next Wednesday at 3 o'clock. And this is Dr. Donald Jolly Gabriel signing off on Kcaa 1050 on your AM radio dial. The show is What's It All About? See you next Wednesday at 3 o'clock.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.
You're on board KCAA's Inland Talk Express. KCAA, Loma Linda, 1050 AM, the station that leaves no listener behind.
I'm Chris Maurer, CNBC Business Radio. Stocks are higher. The Dow's up 55 points. The Nasdaq higher by 8. Shares of Visa hitting an all-time high today, and MasterCard rose sharply after China said it would open its market to